Last night, as we were recording this, the Eastern Conference Final matchup between the Milwaukee Bucks and the Atlanta Hawks was wrapped up, and the Bucks ended up winning this series in 6 games. This was a really interesting series. At times, it wasn't as entertaining as some of the other series that we've seen in this playoffs, but it was interesting to see the different matchups that had happened throughout this series, and also how injuries played a huge factor, and how both of the teams were able to adapt without their best players on their team, in specifically Game 5 and also Game 6 for the Bucks, missing Giannis in both of those games. And overall, the Milwaukee Bucks are victorious, and in this video, I'm going to be talking about 4 main reasons why they were able to get the job done in this series and how they're now in the NBA Finals. So with that being said, let's get right into it. The first big thing I want to talk about here is how the Bucks were able to guard Trae Young really effectively in this series. Obviously, the Knicks weren't able to do that in the first round. The Sixers were able to do it pretty effectively, but not enough to win the series. But in this series against the Bucks, Trae Young struggled more than he ever has throughout this playoffs. He's easily has emerged as one of the best young players in the game right now, easily a top 20 player, especially because of his playoff run in this season. But in the series, he definitely struggled. He still did put up 28 points per game throughout the series and did miss Game 5, but he only shot 43% from the field and only 27% from 3 and a 55% true shooting. All of these are definitely under average percentages, and we've also seen throughout the playoffs how Trae Young's playmaking has been absolutely insane, and he's usually had an assist to turnover ratio of about 3-1. But in this series, he had 27 assists in total and 24 turnovers in total, so almost a 1-to-1 assist to turnover ratio, which for Trae Young is not good at all. And the Bucks really guarded him really effectively in this series. In Game 1, Trae Young had 26 points in the first half and ended up with 48 in the game, and they guarded him absolutely horribly. They came in with no plan and did a horrible job against Trae Young in that game, and the Hawks were able to win Game 1. But ever since then, I actually do give credit to Mike Budenholzer here. He did make some adjustments, and I'm not even going to lie, after Game 1, I had an entire video planned that I was going to make on this channel about 5 adjustments that the Bucks could make to guard Trae Young. Now, I actually like I said, I give Mike Budenholzer credit here. He has not been a good coach throughout this playoffs for the Bucks. He doesn't make a lot of adjustments in game during the playoffs, but he did here, and pretty much all of the adjustments that I had in mind, he made them. The main one was how they stopped playing drop in the pick and roll, and they limited Brook Lopez's minutes. So obviously Brook Lopez in this series was pretty much a liability in the pick and roll. When he was dropping in the pick and roll, there was no way they were going to stop Trae Young and Clint Capella in that pick and roll. So not only did they stop playing drop, but they also limited Lopez's minutes because of his inability to defend on the perimeter. A guy like Bobby Portis did a really good job in this series defending the pick and roll, not playing drop, and overall did a great job as the big man defensively. And Budenholzer was also smart in the sense that for the rest of the series, other than Game 1, he kept Jrue Holiday on Trae Young the entire time as definitely the primary matchup. Jrue Holiday guarded Trae for a grand total of 23 minutes throughout the series, and the second most a Bucks player was guarding Trae Young was PJ Tucker with only 6 minutes. In the first game, they tried to throw a lot of different matchups towards him, and none of them were working except for Jrue Holiday, so Budenholzer made the common sense adjustment and kept Jrue on him for the entire series, and that was another big adjustment that they needed to make. They just needed to use common sense and keep a clamp god like Jrue Holiday on him. He did a fantastic job in this series guarding Trae Young one-on-one, and we have to give him 100% credit for his play on the defensive end of the floor as well. A couple other adjustments that the Bucks made towards guarding Trae a little bit better. Jrue Holiday forced him left a few times, which is something that more teams need to do against Trae Young to guard him more effectively. And finally, the Bucks started going over the screen. It really infuriated me in Game 1 when in the pick and roll, they would go under the screen. It's like, you're literally guarding Trae Young. He's obviously going to hit that 3 at the top of the key in the pick and roll. They finally started fighting over the screen. Again, Jrue Holiday, tons of credit to him. He did a great job of this specifically. And overall, they did a great job of guarding Trae. One more time with those stats, he only shot 43% from the field, 27% from 3, and 55% true shooting, and the Bucks guarded him really well in this series. The second main thing I want to talk about here is just the Bucks defense in general. Obviously, they did a pretty good job of guarding Trae, but overall, especially throughout the entire NBA playoffs, they've actually had the best defense in the playoffs with a defensive rating of 105, and in this series, they had a really good defensive series against the Hawks again. They had a 109 defensive rating, and in the last couple games, you could see how their defense was struggling a little bit more with Giannis out of the lineup, but still overall, they played really good defensively. Like I talked about, they did a great job of guarding Trae. They did a really good job specifically of getting back on defense in transition. The Hawks had absolutely no transition game in this series. I've talked about transition game a lot in these series analysis type of videos. The team that gets out in transition most is probably going to win. And there were a couple times where the Hawks tried to, but they really struggled because the Bucks had a really good transition defense. This is mostly just about effort, just hustling back and getting back there and guarding when the Hawks were running out in transition, so they did a great job of that. They also did a really good job of playing smart defensively and playing to percentages. This reminds me of a defense like the 2020 Raptors. This was like the definition of a perfect defense this season for my team. If you guys watch the channel, you know I'm a Raptors fan. In 2020, they had an amazing style of defense, and something they did was play percentages, so they would obviously leave open three-point shooters that have percentages that are well below average. The Bucks did a good job of this series, leaving open shooters that didn't have a high percentage from where they were shooting, so they knew the percentages. They played very smart defense, and overall they did well in rotations too. They had pretty good help defense. They shrunk the floor at times when needed, and on rotations when the Hawks were trying to move the ball on the perimeter, they did a good job of recovering and obviously staying on their man. So overall their defense was really good, and I'm noticing too that the two best defensive teams in the playoffs are meeting up in the NBA Finals. I'm gonna make a specific video just talking about how defense wins championships. I've always talked about throughout this year how I didn't think the Brooklyn Nets would make the NBA Finals, and obviously they got unlucky with injuries, but I think a big reason for it is how they had a below average defense. I talked about that multiple times on the channel as well, but ultimately the two best defensive teams probably in the entire league are meeting up in the NBA Finals, and this is not a coincidence at all. In this series specifically, the Bucks did a pretty good job defensively, and they've earned their way to the finals specifically because of their defense. Okay, so I've talked a lot about the Bucks defense now and how they were able to shut down the Hawks, but let's talk about the other side of the floor now. We know that Giannis Antetokounmpo hyperextended his knee near the end of Game 4 and had to miss all of Game 5 and Game 6. It's looking like he actually might be back for the finals, which is obviously great, but they definitely missed him, especially defensively in the last couple games in this series. But offensively, the Bucks' second and third options, and of course Jrue Holiday and Chris Middleton, really stepped up offensively. Giannis dominated the first 4 games as usual, putting up 27 points per game, 10 rebounds per game, 6 assists per game, on 60% from the field and 62% true shooting. But they needed their second and third options to step up with him out in Game 5 and 6, and they did. Jrue Holiday in the last 2 games of this series in Game 5 and 6 averaged 26 points, 7.5 rebounds, and 11 assists on 20 of 43 shooting from the field, and obviously throughout this entire series played great defense as well. He was one of the best players in this series without a doubt, and also Chris Middleton stepped up in these last couple of games as well. We saw last night just how dominant he was in the third quarter, and I saw this thing on Instagram the other day talking about how Chris Middleton is so inconsistent and he either plays like Kevin Durant or Kyle Kuzma, and this is completely true, but in the last 2 games of this series we mostly saw the Kevin Durant version of Chris Middleton. He was absolutely dominant. In Game 5 and 6, he averaged 29 points per game, 8.5 rebounds, and 7.5 assists on 20 of 42 shooting from the field. Both of these guys stepped up huge offensively, played pretty well in one-on-one. I mean, most of their buckets too. You see how they're slightly a little bit inefficient or have average efficiency in these games. These guys were creating their own shots. Jrue Holiday specifically using his dribble moves, creating his own shot in one-on-one matchups. Same thing with Middleton. He did a great job of scoring in all 3 levels and creating his own shot, and both of these guys just straight up dominated in one-on-one matchups and stepped up huge offensively with their scoring, their playmaking and passing ability, and leading their teams to this point. So those 3 points I just talked about, the Bucks defense, how they were able to guard Trae Young, and the stepping up of Jrue Holiday and Chris Middleton, are really the 3 main things I want to talk about today's video. But something I want to point out as well is the play of Brook Lopez specifically in Game 5. Now, Game 5 was a really interesting game. I mean, Trae Young and Clint Capella were missing for the Hawks, and Giannis was obviously out for the Bucks. So role players had to step up, and Lopez absolutely did that. He had 33 points in this game on 14 of 18 shooting, 4 blocks, and played amazing defense. Let's talk about his defense first, because obviously he was completely a liability in the pick and roll in this series, but with Trae Young being out, this actually allowed him to be really effective defensively. Because there was no pick and roll, he was able to play, he was playable, and he played a really good impact for this team. We know that last year, he actually made the all-defensive second team. So he's like playing like a defensive liability this year, but we still gotta know that he does have defensive talent, and we saw that when Trae Young was out of the game. He was a very good defender in the paint. There was no pick and roll, so he didn't have to play that drop and be uncomfortable by playing on the perimeter in the pick and roll like he did against Trae Young. He was in the paint, he had 4 blocks, and he contested a lot of shots around the rim, so he was great defensively and offensively. Without Giannis, usually when Giannis is on the floor, he has to play as a floor spacer and try to shoot the 3, but without Giannis on the floor, he was the big man that was playing bully ball in the paint. And like I mentioned, he shot 14 of 18 from the field because of this, which is absolutely insane, and only shot 2 threes, and he was actually 0 of 2 from 3, so 2 of his 4 rare misses came from 3. So you can see how not only just Giannis being out of the game was allowed him to play in the paint, and they were talking about this on TNT too. Shaq was talking about he wants Brook Lopez to play like a big man, and Brook Lopez absolutely did that in Game 5 without Giannis, and it was a lot easier for him too without Clint Capella. I mean, Capella's an all-defensive caliber player without a doubt, and this game really stood out to me because of how Lopez played, but also how Capella's impact defensively for this Hawks team is just everything. They're absolutely nothing on defense without Clint Capella in the game. He has so much impact for them, and they really needed him in Game 5. I think if the Hawks are healthy in this game, it could be a different story, and I just really wanted to point out how Brook Lopez played amazing in that game. But overall, for the entire series, the Bucks defense was amazing like I talked about. Their role players and second and third options really stepped up. They did a great job of guarding Trae Young, and these are the main reasons why they were able to win this series. So there you have it. That is the end of today's video. Comment down below your thoughts on this series and my analysis on it today. If you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button. I'm posting a lot of NBA content right now. I'm coming out with a big ranking series where I do my top 10 from each position, currently in a big top 50 list at the end of the season, so subscribe. Stay tuned for that. I will be posting very shortly my prediction and analysis and finals preview for the NBA Finals between the Phoenix Suns and the Milwaukee Bucks. So if you're new to the channel, there's a lot of extra content coming up that you don't want to miss out on. Hit that subscribe button. Thank you all for watching this video, and I'll see you guys next video.